Yeah, I'm trying to get the gallery. How do I get gallery here? Because I don't like looking at myself while I'm talking. Um, I'm doing this on my phone, Chaim. So can you please advise me? I want to get somehow to gallery.
I think just swipe to the right.
Oh, right. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. Okay, now I can see who I'm talking to. Okay, so like I said, just on a personal note, so I'm here in New York since yesterday. I came with my wife to pick up our daughter Bracha from camp. My wife flew home with her last night, and I her for Shabbos. I already stayed, and the benefit was that I got a full, probably I guess like 24 hours of literally personal time. So with very few distractions. You meet a friend here and there at the Ohel, right? But Baruch Hashem. So this morning I started the day nice and bright and early, and I was learning the chitas from Chumash, and the pasuk that stood out to me in today's parsha of the Chumash is where, and I'm going to say this by heart, unless I can find the Chumash real fast. Okay, so it says that Hashem said, "Lemi rubchem." It's not because you were so multiple and great and big that Hashem chose you and He loves you, right? Ge'atem hama'at mikol ha'amim. You're actually one of the few in population amongst the nations, and yet Hashem loves you. And then we also had previously in the parsha again, where the pasuk mentions the ahava, the love that Hashem has for Bnei Yisrael. And I was, like I said, when you have time, so you start looking around, in different places, and I found, something that's actually in La Sefer from the Maralmi Prague. The Maralmi Prague wrote a Sefer Netzach Yisrael, and he writes about the love, the ava that Hashem has for Bnei Yisrael, that it's a absolute and an unconditional love. In the in the words of the Maral, if I remember properly, he says it's not a mikra. It's not that, because of something, therefore Hashem loves us, but rather, and I don't remember exactly what the lashon was, but rather in Chassidus we would say it's an ava atzmis. It's a innate love that literally is not subject, to any rationalization whatsoever. It's an absolute love. It's a love for no reason other than somehow we are bonded with Hashem. Okay, as a matter of fact, the term kichelek eloka, a yid is a chelek eloka. So it's almost as if you could say that Hashem loves us as if, so to speak, kaviyachol, so to speak. You have to be very careful when we speak about Hashem that we're using terminology that we are familiar with, terminology that applies to us as human beings. And we have to be careful when we apply it to Hashem, but it doesn't mean that we can't apply it in our understanding of our relationship with Hashem. So, with all the precautions, just as a person has this natural love for self, it doesn't have to be explained. It's somewhat, it's not a rational thing. It's just it's a natural thing. It's something that's innate. Avas atzmai. A person cannot be in any way objective about his own self or his behavior, his character, because it is blinded by this innate love. Adam karev al atzmai. So you're not trusted to give an objective opinion about yourself, right? Because it's clouded by this atzmi, this essential love that one has for himself. So it's almost as if we Hashem, the reason why He loves us is because since Kechelik Elika Mimal Mamish, every single Jew possesses a part of Hashem, so to speak, right? And by the way, we know this from Hatzvi-Bais of Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe begins, the very beginning of Hatzvi-Bais of Tanya, that Hanefesh Hashenis BeYisrael, the second nefesh, the nefesh Elikis that each and every one of us possess, Yichelek Elika Mimal Mamish. It's literally like a part. It's a part of Hashem. Now, the part that the Alter Rebbe, the words Chelek Elika are not original from the Alter Rebbe. This is brought in many different places. It even has a source in Tanakh, right? That every Jew possesses a soul which is a part of Hashem. Chelek Elika Mimal. The Alter Rebbe, I think this was unique to the Alter Rebbe. He added the word mamish. Okay, so the word mamish means really, really, literally speaking. Okay, and it's been challenged, by the way. We accept everything that the Alter Rebbe says because we're Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe, but there are those who actually challenge this addition of the word mamish. By the way, incidentally, this is, I think, also today's Hayom Yom, right? That the reason why you love another Yid is because, not because he's doing you nice favors or he's beneficial to you in some way, but rather because when you see a Yid, what do you see? You see a Chelek Elika. So loving in today's Hayom Yom, it says that the love that a person, a Yid, has for another Yid, and the love that one has for Hashem, for example, it's also from this week's parsha, the Haftas Hashem Lekecha. We have a mitzvah to love Hashem. The fact is that the mitzvah is not to develop that love, but the mitzvah is just to discover that love, because again, that's a love that's innate. It's part of our very nature to love Hashem because we possess a part of Hashem within us, right? So it's almost as if we're loving ourselves. This is also a point the Alter Rebbe makes in Perek Lamed Beis, chapter 32 of Tanya. Okay, so my point, what I'm getting to is that we use this terminology. We're familiar with it because it exists in our reality. But the truth is that we also apply these ideas, these concepts when we're speaking about Hashem. And why that is valid and why we're allowed to do that, that's a different conversation. But the fact is we do it. And it occurs to me, of just reading today's parsha, you all know that I've famously said, or maybe not so famously said, but I have said many, many times before, that Chumash Devarim is a marathon farbrengen of Moshe Rabbeinu. And when you read the parsha, with that in mind, the words begin to take on a whole new meaning. And every year when we start Chumash Devarim, I get a little excited because here goes the farbrengen. And yeah, perhaps it's because I've chosen to look at it from that perspective, but I don't regret it. I even recommend it. Okay, so when you're learning literally, you're learning Chumash from now until Simchas Torah, you're going to be learning Chumash Devarim. Now, especially in the beginning, the first 3 or 4 parshas, Devarim, Eschanon, Eikev, Re'eh, if you look at it properly and you read them the way I'm suggesting, you literally feel like you're having a farbrengen with Moshe Rabbeinu. So here, Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he farbrengen with us? He farbrengen with us, and he told you we should know that Hashem loves you, right? And it's not because you're so great that Hashem loves you. He loves you because he loves you, because it's almost as if he cannot help it. So we're attributing this notion that we have this innate, natural love for ourselves, and we're going to take that and we're going to project it and we're going to apply it to Hashem. Okay? And we're going to say that, why Hashem loves us? So like in the words of the Maral says it's not something that mikra, it's not because of something that happened, but it's absolute. It's because, so to speak, Hashem, so to speak, he loves himself, so he loves us. Okay? Which is the same basis for Abbas Yisrael, the mitzvah of loving another Jew. Right? This is the point, again, I mentioned from Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya, is that it's not a challenge. It's actually the most natural thing for a person to love another Jew. Okay. So this is a theme that wasn't what I was supposed to be talking about today. I think the title was the continuation of the unifying theory, right? Where everything in Torah is all really some kind of a manifestation and extension of one basic principle. Okay, and therefore, interestingly, in Torah we find that there are things that just overlap and things that parallel one another because they share the same quintessential essence, right? So I started this conversation based on the Maimer of Achba Gödel, where we find that the Rebbe in this Maimer, the Rebbe parallels things that on the surface don't have nothing to do with one another. We are a people. The land of Israel is a land. We as a people, there are different, different statuses, I guess. But then there's also different expectations of our performance of Torah mitzvahs, and all of this is explained in one pasuk, Ach begoyrel yecholik aretz, or a few psukim, where we find the division of Eretz Yisrael was on the three different ways, three different modes, and that all carries over to everything else that's connected, because it's all connected, it's all one. Even though on the surface it doesn't necessarily seem so. Okay, but like I said, when I teach, I like to teach something that inspired me. It inspires me. I think I'll have some success, or at least I'll enjoy the shir. Okay, if no one else does, but at least I will, because I'm focusing on something that I happen to find to be very inspiring. And that is the love that Hashem. We have a mitzvah from this week's parsha to love Hashem. It's an unconditional love. It's ahava, as the pasuk goes on to say, that therefore it has to be on every element of your inner self, your inner consciousness, totally, completely. It has to encompass all of it. And this is actually expressed in the pasuk when it says b'chol levavecha, with all of your heart, or hearts, literally translated, meaning that this is an ahava that has to cross the boundaries of holiness, the boundaries of the natural, right, the mundane, right? We have a nefesh elikis, okay, of course, that nefesh loves Hashem, but pasuk is telling you that no, it's got to be also with your nefesh habaham, it's also with your animals, so both of your hearts, your yetzer tov and your yetzer hara, right? And then b'chol me'edecha, b'chol nafshecha, you have to be willing even to sacrifice your life, and b'chol me'edecha, that's b'chol me'edecha, right? So it goes across the board, literally across the board. We have this ahava to Hashem, and again, it goes all back to the principle that the ahava is an unconditional, 100% absolute ahava. But then here we have in this week's parasha numerous times that Hashem is loving us, and you shall know that this ahava, tells us Moshe Rabbeinu in this great Farbrengen, is an ahava that's totally unconditional. Okay, this is according to the Maral Prague that I quoted before from the Sefer Netzach Yisrael, and also something that's expounded on in Chassidus, right? But the Maral, right? The Maral, who preceded the Baal Shem Tov by 150, 200 years, already established, some of these ideas, and he says there that therefore the avo is not dependent on the behavior of a yid. Not dependent on the behavior of a yid. If a yid is a yid, and therefore Hashem loves him. Okay, it's completely irrelevant, because in the words again, in the style, in the nusach of the Maral, it's not b'mikra. It's not something that happens, which can be traced back to cause and effect, right? But rather it's absolute, it's innate. Hashem Pashat loves us. So a little bit later on, just to bring this point out, a little bit later on in Chumash Devarim, in Pashas Ekev, I believe, there's a famous maimer from the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah where this point is really, really it hits the mark, as they say. And here it's at a place later in Chumash Devarim where Moshe Rabbeinu was reminiscing, so to speak, about the travels and the travails in the Midbar. And he speaks about when Bnei Yisrael were getting close to the border of Eretz Yisrael on the other side of the Yarden, where we find ourselves now. Okay, that's where that big Farbrengen took place, on the banks of the Jordan River, on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, before the Yidden crossed over into Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu was mentioning how when they attempted to approach the land of Israel, and there was the land of Moav in the way, right? And they were not given permission. They had a mitzvah. They were not allowed to start up with Moav. They weren't allowed to wage war with Moav. And Moshe Rabbeinu reminisces about the what happened with Bilam, right? Which is interesting because Balak hired Bilam. It was, in a way, Balak was kind of silly because he didn't have to hire Bilam because the Jews had no intention of taking his land anyway. They were not permitted to take his land. I don't know what happened to Balak. I don't know, maybe he wasn't aware of that or he forgot that. It's very unlikely that he was not aware, but I guess, just like Ahava is unconditional, sometimes Sinah is unconditional as well. So this whole thing with, that we had just the last in Chumash Bamidbar, the whole story with Balak and Bilam from a couple of weeks ago, in a sense, there's something doesn't really match up over here, because what was Balak concerned about? The Yidden were prohibited from capturing his land anyway. So the answer is simple, because Balak Pashat had this hate, and regardless, he did not make, a rational decision over here. He just hated them, so he hired Bilam to curse them, right? Now, Bilam was a clever person, and he saw that the cursing is not going to work. He charged a lot of money for it, by the way, but he saw that it wasn't going to work, right? He was not free to do as he had intended. So what happened, as the story turns out, what happened is that, of course, it was turned into brachis, but then Bilam figured out that he's going to do something that he hoped might have some success. And what did he do? He reminded, somewhat encrypted in his words, but Rashi picks it up, and he was he figured he's going to bring up the sins of the Bnei Yisrael, okay? And not only is he going to bring them up, he was the antagonist. He was the one who actually caused it by having the daughters of Moav entice the Bnei Yisrael. Okay, and that leads us, of course, to the story of Pinchas, right, and so on and so forth. But this was a something that was this was a clever thing, that was a scheme of Bilam, right, to entice the Bnei Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe points out something very interesting along the themes of what I started to speak about: the unconditional love that Hashem has for Bnei Yisrael. The absolute and unconditional love. The Alter Rebbe says, Bilam, so he was clever, right? And he came up with, bringing up issues that were not necessarily, that did not put the Bnei Yisrael in good light. And he figured, maybe that'll work. But he totally miscalculated, because Bilam didn't understand the love that Hashem has for Bnei Yisrael. So when you're going to look in the Psukim, a little bit later on in Chumash Devarim, where Moshe Rabbeinu was reminiscing about what happened with Bilam, right? And not only Bilam, foresaw the sins of Bnei Yisrael, and he decided to bring them up, he actually was part of that whole scheme of enticing using even the women of Moav who were coming from from very aristocratic homes, but nonetheless, they were willing to subject themselves to some very lowly behavior in order to entice the Bnei Yisrael, and to some degree, as we see, they actually succeeded, right? And this Bilam, it was almost like this was his only hope, his last hope. Okay, but what did he miscalculate? He totally miscalculated, because, as Moshe Rabbeinu points out, Le'ava Hashem likecha lishmaya el Bilham. Hashem had no desire whatsoever to listen to Bilam. And what did he do? He turned over the curses into blessings. And the Alter Rebbe points out very, very clearly. He says, not because Bilam didn't have a point. As a matter of fact, says the Alter Rebbe, Bilam had a good argument. He had a very good point. Okay? He wasn't wrong. He was right. Right? However, Le'ova Hashem Lishbait. Hashem didn't want to hear. Right? It's very interesting. The words of the Alter Rebbe, he says, Hashem didn't want. He stubbornly didn't want. That's like, obviously the Alter Rebbe didn't use the word stubbornly, but when you read the words, right, it literally, that's what it sounds like. Hashem decided, I don't want to hear what you have to say, right? You might be 100% right, okay? And you're right, the Jews perhaps do not deserve. They deserve actually to be punished, as you point out, right? This was their fault, and, this was, it was their sin, for which they should carry the responsibility. But nonetheless, says Hashem, there's something that overrides it all. And what is it? And the pasuk ends, Ki ahevcha Hashem alikecha. Hashem just loves you. Right? This is Moshe speaking to Bnei Yisrael. Right? The whole Deren is Moshe, right? We speak about the love. It's not Hashem saying, I love you. Hashem said that too, by the way. This is mentioned in Nach, I forget where, but Ahavti eschem Omar Hashem. I love you, says Hashem, right? One of the Nevi'im. That's a pasuk from one of the Nevi'im. So Hashem said it in the first person, but the whole Devarim is Moshe Rabbeinu for bringing with us about the Ava. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu tell us? He didn't want to let Bilam even though he was justified in his argument, right? And perhaps you even deserve, right, to be somewhat, maybe not to the extreme that Bilam wanted to curse them, but there was some. He had some months ago. There was some truth, right? And yet, Le'ova Hashem stubbornly decided, I'm not listening. I don't want to hear about it. Why? There's something deeper. There's a deeper bond over here. That bond is the ahava that Hashem has. Hashem has an ahava for every single Jew. Okay. And by the way, the time we are getting close to the Yomim Neroyim. We're getting close to Elul. As a matter of fact, the Magidim or even the Mashpiyim, they would already start in Elul. They would already start getting people ready for the Yomim Neroyim, the days of judgment, which won't be until after Elul, right? But they would say, Of is already the time to begin to prepare. Because if you look at the name of, it's spelled Aleph-Bais. What does Aleph-Bais stand for? We all know that Elul is the month, right, of the Chodesh HaRachamim. It's the month in which we invoke Hashem's Rachamim in preparation for the days of judgment, the days of right? That's Elul. That's across the board. That's part of the Jewish culture of the month of Elul. It's the month we prepare ourselves for the days of judgment. Okay, but the Magidim were the famous preachers, the Jewish preachers, or today let's call them the Mashpiyim, right? They would already say that in Elul we have to already start, because Elul, like I started to say, Aleph-Bais. What does Aleph-Bais stand for? Elul Ba. Elul's coming. So instead of waiting for Elul, let's prepare ourselves for Elul itself. Elul is preparing for Tishrei, but now we have to prepare even for Elul. So Elul Ba, right? Elul is coming, right? When is the time? When we see clearly, we see Hashem demonstrating the love for every single yid, unconditional love, irrelevant to their behavior. As the Marami Prague points out in the Sefer Netzach Yisrael, that it's irrelevant to their behavior. Their love is so deep, it's so absolute, that it supersedes and it transcends all of the behavior. Like Moshe Rabbeinu verbringed with us and told us why Hashem decided he doesn't want to listen to Bilam. He didn't argue with Bilam. He didn't give a counter argument. He didn't defend the Bnei Yisrael. He did not defend Bnei Yisrael, says Moshe Rabbeinu. He pashut loves. Ki ahevcha. He just loves you. That's all. Love. And the time of the year where this is demonstrated in a very clear and open way begins amidst Hashem, in the month of Elul, and then on Yom Kippur, it literally comes to its pinnacle, where we end the whole Yom Kippur, v'salachti kidvarecha. We begin it with v'salachti kidvarecha. We end it with v'salachti kidvarecha. Hashem forgives us. Why does He forgive us? Because we are just one, and we are attached to Him. Okay, this is the love. So this is something that I was thinking about this morning as I was learning the Chumash, where in today's in today's parsha we have the pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu, again, he repeats about Hashem loving us for no reason other than He just loves us, right? It's also mentioned earlier in the parsha. And that's it. It's all about the Ava that Hashem has for us. Okay, so this is a mitzvah. This is I think to me, this came the theme of the day. The theme of the day. Like I said, this is, you don't understand. Yeah, I mean, maybe you do understand, but it's like it's like I'm in Gan Eden. You can imagine I'm in Gan Eden. Anytime I come to the Ohel and I get to spend some extended time at the Ohel, it's literally like I'm going into Gan Eden, right? So I dive in without with no pressure from any sides. I have to be here. I have to be there. Actually, that's probably the problem of why I almost forgot today's shir, right? I was too wrapped up and absorbed in my own, in my Gan Eden state. So thank you.
It's like a cholent that cooks longer. It's tastier.
Yeah, right. So for those who are coming, I don't know if there's anybody here in the shirs that's coming, but in the background, I hear the caterer getting ready the meal tonight, and he said he's going to have some toyameho. He's going to have some cholent and schnitzel for before Shabbos. That's before Shabbos, okay? So imagine what's going to be on Shabbos. Anyway, so we're getting ready. Mitzvah Hashem. I'm all geared up, all pumped up, Mitzvah Hashem, for a beautiful and a wonderful Shabbos. I don't mean to make any of you jealous, but if you are jealous, that's fine. You have what to be jealous of. And Mitzvah Hashem, the Rebbe is here, the Rebbe is available, and you can have the Rebbe wherever you are, but there's something that's somewhat very powerful when you're in a place where there's nothing but the Rebbe. Okay, there's nothing here except for the caterer getting ready for Shabbos. I mean, so I can't really say there's nothing here, but at the same time, it's all, the focus is all on our connection with the Rebbe and the things that the teachings of the Rebbe, and that the Mitzvah Hashem, what we will be focusing on for the whole weekend. So again, it's all about the Abba. It's all about the love. It's amazing love that Hashem has for Bnei Yisrael. He loves us. I saw this also, I think, in a letter this morning, where the Rebbe says that again, so there's the Hayom Yom, right? Where if you love a Jew and loving Hashem is one and the same, because the reason why you're loving the Jew is because of his nefesh, the chelik alakam imal that's within him. Okay, I mentioned that already. But then I saw something else, but I forget what it was. Okay, you get an overload of.
Look at today's Hayom Yom as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about today's Hayom Yom, exactly. Okay, so this was a little bit not mamish what I had in mind. I do want to tell you though that what inspired me, for the last couple of shiurim was the mime of Ach Begoyrel from Parshas Pinchas. It's a mimer that I have some kind of a sentimental connection to because of the nostalgia that comes along with it. I remember when the mimer was actually published, when it was said and published. And Eretz Hashem, we are going to be learning that mimer on Shabbos morning. I don't know why I keep on bringing this up with you guys. All I'm doing is I'm succeeding in making you even more jealous. But we will be learning that mimer Eretz Hashem. And for those of you who are perhaps not aware, so I'm working on my PhD in epistemology. I don't want to tell you what PhD really stands for, but that's a joke, everybody. But whatever. I learned a new word. It's called epistemology, and I'm playing with it, and I'm enjoying playing with it, and I'm making all kinds of interesting discoveries. And I mentioned already last week, I don't think it was at the shir last week, but I think the shir Shabbos morning, I mentioned the idea that knowledge, by the way, that's what epistemology is, according to where I read it. It's the science of how one acquires knowledge, and there's all different kind of theories about how a person. What does it mean? The acquisition of knowledge, right? So all of the wonderful, great scientists have all kinds of fancy papers and studies, when they create these words, to represent their ideas. And so I decided I'm going to create one too, and that's called Googleism. That's a theory in epistemology where you acquire information and knowledge as long as you have a smartphone or a computer that you can access Google. So that's called, in addition to rationalism and empiricism and existentialism, there's also what's called Googleism, right? Which I think it takes them all. It covers it all. But last week I mentioned something very interesting, and that is that every element of conscious awareness or knowledge or whatever you want to call it, right? One of the big arguments that are always made is that it's based on a premise. Okay, there has to be, as you dig deeper, there is a certain premise, and that premise itself is not necessarily something that you come to this conclusion based on any of the different theories of epistemology, but rather it's like an absolute that you don't even question. Okay. So, for example, when you speak about all the different modes of whatever, of reality and so on and so forth, right? At the end of the day, you could always ask the question, but who said it even exists, right? So, like, what are you talking about? Maybe nothing really even exists, right? There's even an extreme version of that, which is called solipsism. These are all nice words, right? Uh, and then when I see them, I have to practice saying them, so I sound intelligent because it sounds like, epistemology, right? How long it took me how many times I had to repeat the word so that it just flows off the tip of my tongue, right? So anyway, you have even like something called solipsism, which means that perhaps nothing even exists. There was the great philosopher or whatever he was, Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am, whatever. So you only know that you exist, perhaps, and then some question even if that's true. But the bottom line is that everything, if you really, really dig down, it's based on the premise, okay? And that premise transcends all of the different modes of epistemology, okay? They're not included in any of them, okay? It's the foundation from which all of acquisition of knowledge begins, from some kind of a premise, right? Now, if that's the case, that's where choice becomes a factor. Choice is now a factor because being that it's not a premise based on the different ways of acquiring knowledge, right? Just a premise, it's an absolute that you just accept, and you use that as the beginning stepping stool, from building whatever you're going to build from that point, right? So choice comes into play. You have to choose. You're choosing to accept the premise. You choose to accept. You choose to accept the premise. Okay. So that's a very interesting thing. I think I mentioned, like, for example, the debates between someone who believes and somebody who doesn't, an atheist or whatever, right? At the end of the day, the person who believes chooses to believe, and the atheist is choosing not to believe. Okay? And you can make arguments from today to tomorrow, and you're going to be drawn to the argument that supports your choice. Okay? So the atheist is drawn to the argument that supports his choice, and the believer is drawn to the argument that, yeah. So in this week's Mimer, since some of you, in the Mimer Ach Begerel, so some of you, for those of you who will be there, Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow, so let me just tell you one nekuda that the Rebbe says, one point that the Rebbe makes here on this Mimer, and that is that the Rebbe wants to argue, or the Rebbe argues, the Rebbe makes the case, the Rebbe's not arguing it, the Rebbe's making the case that Golus, right, exile, Golus, is not a happy state. It's not a happy state of existence. That's Golus, right? If it would be happy, we wouldn't call it Golus, right? So Golus is an unfortunate, and it's not a happy place. Okay, but then the Rebbe says that upon deeper reflection, you can come to the conclusion that Golus, on the surface, perhaps doesn't look so good, but ultimately, it's only for good. It's only good. And here the Rebbe makes a very interesting state. I remember learning this, and I mean, it wasn't so much about me getting excited. I was just a kid. I was 15 or 16 years old at the time. But I would see how other people would get excited about things. And I said, oh, wow, this is something to get excited about. So I knew that this chapter in the Minor, myself and my chavrusa, I'm learning. I said, no, we're supposed to get excited about this chapter. Let's find what is it so exciting here in this chapter. And I don't know whether I actually appreciated it at the time. Maybe I pretended to appreciate it, but whatever. So I remember this particular Perek. I remember, some of the deeper minds, that of my contemporaries that understood things, much deeper, much better than I could. We're getting excited, so I knew that okay, I'm supposed to get excited over here. Anyway, as life moved on and I revisit the Mimer, the older I get, the more I begin to appreciate why it was so exciting. What was the excitement over here? So the Rebbe says, and it's a very interesting way that the Rebbe expresses it. The Rebbe says this idea that Golus, right, that darkness is something that only exists. You only perceive it on the surface, but below the surface, it's really light. It's all light. I mean, that's a difficult statement, for somebody who's actually living through some tragedy or whatever. You don't want to tell that to that person. But at some point, the person himself, if they're dealing with it in a healthy way, and over time they're able to heal from the trauma and so on and so forth, they are able to appreciate this notion that below the surface, there's no darkness, there is only light. Okay. Now, what's interesting here in the Maimer is the Rebbe says is that this case can be made on two levels. He said one level, okay, is for the Nefesh Elikis. The Nefesh Elikis, so from in the field of epistemology, the Nefesh Elikis knows things, right? How does the Nefesh Elikis knows things? Because the Nefesh Elikis has some kind of an intimate bond with Hashem. So as far as the Nefesh Elikis is concerned, the Nefesh Elikis knows that if Hashem says it's good, that it is good. I can't see it, but Hashem says it's good. Okay, and there it makes that point. Al pi Hashem Yisu, al pi Hashem Yachanu. That everything that happens, whether you're moving forward or you're staying in place, which is the way the travels in the Midbar were described, that when they moved, it was by the word of Hashem. When they rested, it was by the word of Hashem. Right? So the Rebbe takes that concept and the Rebbe applies it also to Chayshech and Ar. When things are looking, bright, it's because of Hashem. When things are looking not bright, when they're looking dark, it's because of Hashem. So at the end of the day, the Nefesh Elikis, it's all because of Hashem. If it's because of Hashem, so then the Nefesh Elikis goes forward with the belief and the bitachon that in spite of the fact that right now we can't see things, but that's because of the restrictions and the boundaries that we have because our neshama happens to be in a guf, right? But we still have some kind of a connection to that level of understanding that the neshama has before the restrictions of the confinement, the physical state of being in a body, it subjects you to. So therefore, it's able to make it through all the darkness because he knows it's al pi Hashem, it's from Hashem. So he's able to accept it. But then the Rebbe goes on and says, but you should know there's also an argument that even the Nefesh Habamis can appreciate. You can't just tell him it's al pi Hashem. Nefesh Habamis says, I don't know what this thing al pi Hashem. Don't bother me with that. I need an argument. Give me an argument how I'm going to make it through the darkness. Okay? And the Rebbe says, the argument is that Yerida Tzerich Aliyah. The idea that in order to really achieve great heights, right, there are times when you have to actually go down. And by going down, you're able to achieve greater heights. There's a physical model that's used in Chassidus, and that's called a lever. A lever is that if you want to lift something up, right, so you have to leverage it on some kind of point, right? But where does it actually reach? It has to reach down, deep down below in order to lift everything, whether it's a building, whether it's whatever it is, it's called the model of a lever. So the lever, that's something that's mathematical, right? That's engineering. And it works in engineering. That sometimes the best way of lifting a very, very heavy thing is to leverage. Does the word leverage come from lever? Right, a lever, right? So you use a lever. Lever means you have to dig down in order to lift up, right? And this is something because the Nefesh Habamis, could be an engineer if it wants, right? So it could use a principle from engineering in order to make the case that if something on the surface looks like a yerido, it's a descent, it's down, it's dark, it's going to a place that's painful, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, according to the Chachmas engineering, the great wisdom of engineering, it's actually a process of getting something to go even way higher than it originally was. Okay, so this is a Mitzvah Hashem, a little preview of that Maimer that we will be learning tomorrow here at the Ohel. So I think we're pretty much out of time. It's almost 11:30. I hope you enjoyed what I had to share with you, even though some of it was just just at the spur of the moment. But I always figure, let me go with what I'm already inspired with. And I said, Baruch Hashem, I'm having a very inspiring time here, learning and davening. And I hope you're inspired with that which has inspired me. Okay, and that's the love that Hashem has for us, mentioned over in the parsha, and also a little preview of an interesting idea that how we know things. Some of them we know from our nefesh alikis, who just sees things on a different level, and some of them we could figure out even with our nefesh habam is based on certain principles of engineering. Okay, so that will wrap it up for today.
Hello,
Thank you
Rabbi.
very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Rabbi
Yes, you're
Deren.
very, very welcome.